During this lesson you will be required to fill out a worksheet. I recommend you read through the worksheet before viewing the lesson. In order to give you time to do this, you can use the pause button at the bottom of the screen. Learning outcomes. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to list and describe two methods that can be used for bedding edgings or kerbs. When edgings and kerbs are laid to a curve, an unacceptable wide joint can appear between adjacent units, so you should be able to list two ways of overcoming this problem. Introduction. Concrete bedded edgings and kerbs are used wherever a rigid support or restraint is required at the perimeter of a pavement. They are essential for block paving and tarmac driveways and can be used for all other types of paving. All edgings or kerbs need to be bedded onto a medium strength concrete base, so a small foundation is required. Bedding kerbs and edgings. This can be split into three simple operations and used with all concrete, fire clay or stone edgings. 1. Lay out the bedding material. 2. Lay the edgings or the kerbs. And 3. Haunch the edgings or the kerbs in place. One, laying out the bedding material. The bedding concrete should be laid out approximately 100 to 150 mm thick before compacting along where the edging is required. Lay out 5 or so linear meters at a time and compact by tamping. Prepare the bed with a trowel or spade so that it is approximately 25 mm proud, adding extra bedding if required. Then lay the edging on the bedding material to the required level. Alternatively, tamp the concrete to the approximate reduced level of the underside of the edging or kerb, remembering to allow for a mortar bed later. So for example, if we were using a 60 mm paver, we measure down from the line 60 mm plus 20 mm gives us 80 mm. So the concrete should be 80 mm down from the line. Then later on, when the concrete has gone hard, the kerbs are laid on top of a mortar bed no thicker than 25 mm, usually between 12 and 20 mm. This is the preferred method, as it's more accurate. 2. Laying the edgings and kerbs. Place the edging or the kerb on top of the concrete bedding and tap down to the required level using your line as a guide. The string line guide should be followed as closely as possible, and the edging or kerb should never be more than 3 mm above or below the line. It is important to be as accurate as possible to ensure levels and gradients are as planned, and the top surface of the edging or the kerb should be checked for level across the kerb or the edging and not along the length of the unit. If an edging is not directly adjacent to the string line guide, as when creating a curve as seen in the diagram up above, then use a spirit level to check the levels back to the string line guide. 3. Haunching. This is undertaken once the laying process is completed and the edgings have been checked for alignment both along the face and over the top surface. Place the haunching concrete at the back, therefore the outside edge of the edging. As a rule of thumb, the haunching concrete should be at least 100 mm wide for a driveway and 2/3 the height of the kerb. Compact and smooth the haunching concrete with the back of the trowel or spade to make sure that the kerb or the restrainer doesn't move afterwards. Laying to curves and arcs. The size of the arc will determine the best way of setting out, particularly establishing any intermediate points that may be used as guides during the laying of the arc. Remember, the more intermediates there are, the sweeter the curve will be. as seen in the two diagrams opposite. Many curves and arcs can be laid using standard kerbs or edgings. However, there comes a point when the individual units are skewed to such an extent that an unacceptable wide joint is present between adjacent units. Or as seen above, the curve is starting to look more like a hexagon using the longer units. So there are two ways of resolving these problems. The first way is to use radius units. The second is by reducing the length of the standard units. So we can see the example here. First we have our standard length units, 915mm, set to the curve, and then by simply snapping them in half, we can see that the curve looks much sweeter in the second ring. Here's another example. We're using full bricks on the left hand side here, but the V joint, the width of the V joint is unacceptable on the far side of the bricks. So we simply snapping the bricks in half and setting out the curve again, the joints become a lot more pleasing to the eye and a lot more acceptable. Conclusion. Two methods that are used for bedding edgings or kerbs are: 1. To lay them directly on top of a 100 to 150mm thick fresh concrete foundation, or 2. To lay them on top of a 100 to 150mm thick hard foundation with a 20mm mortar bed underneath them. This second method is the preferred method. Two ways of overcoming the problem of unacceptable wide joints appearing between adjacent units in edgings or kerbs that are laid to a curve are: 1. To use radius units, which give an excellent appearance but are quite expensive to purchase, or 2. To reduce the length of the standard units, which can give a very good appearance and which is much cheaper than buying radius units.